The bridge was already counting down when she said no. Cold numbers bled down the main viewport in red, reflected in the glass. Vacuum pressure cycle, initiating. External hatch, armature engaged. The air itself felt thinner, as if the ship had decided to start letting go of her before the doors even opened. Aria stood at the center of the command deck with her wrists locked behind her by humming magnetic cuffs. The metal bit into her skin with every small shift of movement, cold and unforgiving. The vibration of the drive core traveled up through the floor, a low rumble that crawled into her bones. Beyond the panoramic glass, the stars hung in endless silence. "I will not," she said. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Captain Vargos leaned forward in his throne-like command chair. His uniform was pristine, the dark fabric broken only by a neat line of polished commendations. He studied her the way a collector studied a cracked artifact, annoyed at the flaw, not the loss. "You misunderstand this moment," he said. His voice carried a faint, practiced softness that never matched his eyes. "There are levers in the universe. Some pull themselves. Some get pulled." Aria lifted her chin. "I choose anyway." The bridge crew stood frozen at their stations. No one spoke. No one met her eyes. The ship's AI continued its countdown with indifferent precision. Her name was Aria of the Loom Reach, last of a line wiped out by navigational wars older than the current charts. The crew called her other things in private. Cargo. Talisman. Payment. She had been all of those unwillingly. She would not be the last one anymore. Vargos rose from his chair. "When a tool refuses to be useful," he said as he stepped toward her, boots clicking softly against the deck, "it becomes debris." "Then throw me into the stars," Aria said. "I'll still leave as myself." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Then it vanished. "Prepare the airlock," he said calmly. "I want an instructive ending." The words hit harder than a shout ever could. 2 armored guards moved in from either side and seized her arms. One tangled his hand in her silver hair to control her head. The other twisted the cuffs upward until pain spiked through her shoulders. She gritted her teeth but made no sound. From the rear navigation console, Jax Reed stopped breathing. A flash of a smaller cockpit, years ago, a child-sized harness unbuckled too late, crossed his mind, his hands slipping, alarms screaming, a silence that never really ended. He shoved the memory down before it could take his legs out from under him. He had been tracing a jump corridor through unstable gravity lanes when the command came. His hands hovered above the half-finished map like they no longer belonged to him. He'd flown through blockade fire. He'd outrun system patrols. He'd made friends with bad people and enemies with worse. He had never watched someone be legally erased. As the guards dragged her toward the corridor, her eyes lifted once. They met his. It wasn't fear in her stare. It wasn't even anger. It was the quiet recognition 2 people share when they realize they both understand the price of standing still. Jax's pulse crashed in his ears. If he thought about it, he wouldn't move. So he didn't think. Alarms began to pulse, slow, warning red, as he stepped away from his station. The airlock corridor was narrow and lined with hazard striping that glowed under emergency lights. The outer hatch loomed at the far end like a waiting jaw. The closer they dragged her, the louder the pressure equilibriums hissed through the walls. Jax came up behind them, keycard already in his palm. "Procedure requires dual authorization," he said, forcing his voice into something steady. The lead guard scoffed. "Captain's word overrides procedure." Jax swiped the panel anyway. Yellow light. Sequence locked. The second guard turned sharply. "What did you just do?" "Stall cycle," Jax replied. "Pressure buffers desincing. Vent now, you risk rebound through the corridor." They hesitated, not out of trust, but out of self-preservation. That hesitation was all Jax needed. His elbow snapped into the lead guard's throat. The man folded with a strangled gasp. The second guard went for his sidearm. The weapon jammed for half a breath, just long enough for Aria to pivot and smash her bound wrists into his visor. The guard collapsed backward into the bulkhead. Jax slammed the emergency seal. The corridor lights dropped to dim amber as lockdown doors began closing in a cascading rhythm behind them. "You just signed your death warrant," the first guard wheezed from the floor. "Yeah," Jax muttered, grabbing Aria's arm. "I know." Boots thundered on metal beyond the sealed door. Jax yanked open a maintenance hatch and shoved her through. They dropped down the vertical shaft just as blaster fire scorched the doorway above. They hit the lower level hard. The impact knocked the breath from Jax's lungs. Pain burst through his ribs. Aria rolled once and came up on her knees, silver hair falling across her face. Her chest rose sharply as she sucked in air. For a moment, all they could hear was their breathing. Then she spoke. "You should have let me finish it." He winced as he pushed himself upright. "I wasn't built for clean endings." He snapped a plasma pick from his belt and sliced the magnetic seals. The cuffs dropped away with a dull clang. Aria rubbed her wrists, skin already bruising beneath the glow. "You broke the captain's command," she said. "I've lived off broken commands," he replied. "They're quieter than loyalty." Above them, armored feet pounded over the deck. "You don't understand what you pulled out of his hands," Aria said softly. "Then don't explain it like a warning," Jax said. "Explain it like truth." She hesitated. "Then, I am a living seal. My blood unlocks navigation through Dead Star corridors that swallow fleets. Every jump carved that way shortens my life a little. That is the price no chart shows. He sold that knowledge before he ever sold my body." Jax let out a slow breath. "So I didn't just steal a prisoner." "No," she said. "You stole a monopoly." Security drones began sweeping the lower maintenance levels with scanning beams that cut through steam and darkness. They moved. Jax knew the hidden paths of the Valkyrian, the heat tunnels, the cable arteries, the forgotten crawlspaces left over from earlier ship classes. He led her through narrow service runs where the walls radiated warmth and the floor vibrated with engine strain. Blaster fire chased them through one intersection. At another, a drone clipped Jax's shoulder with a shock round. Pain tore through him like fire. His arm went numb. Aria caught him before he fell. "Don't slow," he grunted. "Pain's cheaper than breath." The alarms shifted from local to global. That was the sound of a ship changing sides. Crew members scattered through the corridors now, some fleeing, some hunting. Fear spread faster than orders. Overhead announcements began looping containment directives that contradicted themselves. "He's hunting you now," Jax said. Aria didn't ask who he meant. "He always hunts what exposes him," she replied. They reached the auxiliary hangar beneath triple bulkheads. Jax keyed the manual release with shaking fingers. The doors stuttered open halfway, then froze. "Come on, not now," he hissed. Power flared. A surge rippled down the hangar grid. The left bulkhead blew inward in a shower of molten metal. Jax shoved Aria into the rear jump seat of his fighter and sealed her harness as the ship rocked under enemy fire. He dove into the pilot's chair and slammed the ignition. The engines coughed. Again. Behind them, the hangar guns rotated. The engines caught. The moment the bay doors widened enough to breathe through, Jax punched the throttle. The fighter screamed forward as cannon fire tore through the edges of the launch tunnel. Shields flared brilliant white. The ship corkscrewed wildly into open space. The massive body of the Valkyrian loomed behind them, wounded but furious. "You can still turn back," Aria said quietly. "He will erase you if you don't." He erased entire crews for less than this. Jax kept his eyes on the stars. He already tried. The jump drive screamed as it charged. A warning tone pierced the cockpit. "Once you jump," she said, "there is no returning to small lives." Jax swallowed. "I don't think I ever had one." The stars folded into white lines. Space collapsed. Far behind them, aboard a crippled command deck soaked in red emergency light, Captain Vargos stood very still. He watched their disappearance without blinking. "Deploy the long nets," he said. Revenge had already left the ship. They had escaped the void. But they had carried its gravity with them. The jump didn't end clean. It never did. Jax came out of fold space sideways, alarms howling, stars snapping back into place like broken glass trying to fit itself together again. The fighter spun once, twice. He fought the controls with his good arm while the numb one lagged behind like it didn't belong to him. Stabilizers are shot, he muttered. Aria's harness creaked as inertia slammed her into the seat. Her breath hitched, but she didn't scream. She'd learned long ago which sounds were wasted. The craft finally leveled out in a graveyard orbit, a dead moon surrounded by torn rings of ice and metal. Old prison debris. Old war debris. Space that no one claimed because too many ghosts had already tried. "Welcome to nowhere," Jax said. He cut the engines. The sudden silence rang louder than the alarms ever had. They sat there for a moment, suspended between survival and whatever came next. Aria broke it first. "They will follow." Jax exhaled slowly. "Yeah. I figured that part. What you stole from him is not just rare," she said. "It is political. Entire sectors bend around that monopoly. When you broke his hold, you didn't just make an enemy. You tipped a balance." "Good," Jax replied. "Balances make people lazy." He unbuckled with a hiss of hydraulics and nearly pitched forward as pain ripped up his side. Aria caught him again, lighter than she looked, stronger than she should have been. "You're bleeding," she said. "I do that sometimes." He sealed the wound with a synth patch from the cockpit med kit. It burned like it hated him personally. Outside the viewport, the dead moon drifted closer. A ruined station clung to its orbit, half rusted, half frozen, half still twitching with faint power signatures that no sane survey crew would ever sign off on. Jax's lips tilted. "We need fuel, parts, and somewhere nobody wants to brag about finding us." Aria studied the wreckage. "That place will try to kill us." "Yeah," he said. "But not for profit. That's the difference." They docked manually. The landing skids scraped against warped metal as the cockpit depressurized with a tired mechanical sigh. The station interior smelled like cold iron and old chemicals. Emergency lights flickered like they were deciding whether they still believed in their job. Jax swung a power rifle off the wall mount and handed a smaller charge pistol to Aria. "I don't know how to use." "Point." "Mean it." "Squeeze," he said. "Everything else is luck." They moved through corridors packed with drifting debris and silent bodies strapped into chairs that hadn't been ships for a very long time. Some of the corpses were human. Some were not. All of them had died believing this place would be temporary. Aria's breath slowed as they went. Her pupils widened, tracking shadows that weren't moving and ones that were. "You've been hunted before," Jax said quietly. "Not like this." A pressure door screeched open without warning. 3 figures spilled out. Scavers, by the look of them, cheap armor plates, mismatched helmets, rifles older than their grudges. One of them had replaced his left hand with a mining blade that still oozed cooling fluid. "Well, I'll be damned," the leader said. "A pilot and a fairy." Aria stiffened. Jax smiled without humor. "Careful with labels. They stick." The scaver's gaze slid to Aria's ears. Then to her cuffs, gone now. Then to the fighter visible through the docking bay. "That ship ain't junk," he said. "And that girl ain't cheap." He lifted his rifle. Jax fired first. The corridor exploded with sound. One scaver dropped instantly. The second's weapon backfired, shredding his own shoulder in a spray of sparks and bone. The leader bolted. Aria stood frozen for half a heartbeat. "Now," Jax barked. She fired. The blast pierced clean through the scaver's back and slammed into the bulkhead behind him. He collapsed like a string had been cut. Aria stared at the smoking pistol, trembling. "First one's the hardest," Jax said, reloading. "They get complicated after." They scavenged fast. Fuel cells. Patch wire. A cracked navcore that still whispered half-true coordinates. Everything tasted like rust and risk. Aria worked beside him without being asked. "You move like someone who was trained," he said. "I was prepared for many endings," she replied. "Just not freedom." The station shuddered. Not from age. From impact. Jax felt it through the soles of his boots. "That's not debris." A deep signal pulse rippled through the air, vibrating through bone. Aria went pale. "Net class trackers." Jax swore. How long until they triangulate? Less than a minute. The station lights died. Through the docking aperture, space lit up with the arrival of 3 hunter ships, thin, predatory designs, all antennae and cutting beams. Vargos's signature tech. Jax dragged the last fuel cell into the fighter and slammed the hatch. Strap in. The hunters opened fire before their engines were even fully online. The hangar shook violently as the first beam clipped the outer hull. Alarms screamed awake again. Jax punched ignition. Nothing. The fuel cell readouts flickered. Talk to me, he growled at the console. The station buckled as a hunter craft forced its way through the docking ring like a spear into soft metal. Aria closed her eyes. She placed her hand against the nav core. The stars outside twisted. Jax felt the ship shift, not through engines, but through something deeper. Space itself bent like it was being persuaded. The nav screen filled with unfamiliar geometry. Impossible paths. Dead corridors waking up. Her nose bled. Aria. We jump now, she whispered. Or they net us forever. Jax didn't argue. He slammed the manual jump. The fighter vanished just as the hunter's beam tore through the space where they'd been. When they came out the other side, the universe was wrong. Stars burned too close together. Gravity sheared sideways. Time felt thick. Jax fought the controls, teeth clenched. The engine screamed like it might tear itself free. Aria collapsed against her harness, shaking. He caught the ship on the edge of a drifting asteroid cluster and buried it beneath a veil of tumbling rock. Silence returned in pieces. Minutes passed. Aria didn't move. Jax undid his harness and pulled himself to her seat. Her skin felt cold. Aria, he said. Her eyes fluttered. Focus returned slowly, like dawn through dust. You took too much, he said. She swallowed weakly. Every jump takes something. For how long? She met his gaze. Until there is nothing left that matters more than survival. The hunter's signals ghosted through space near where they'd vanished, searching blind. Jax looked out at the warped stars. He had never meant to become leverage. But now he was carrying the most expensive heartbeat in known space. And every power that had ever bowed to monopoly was going to come looking. Section 2 ended not with rest, but with the sound of the hunt beginning. The asteroid field was supposed to be quiet. It never was. Jax kept the fighter buried between slow-tumbling rock and dust so dense it painted the sensors blind. Power stayed low. Heat stayed lower. Every system whispered instead of spoke. Out here, noise was an invitation. Aria slept in broken pieces. She drifted in and out of consciousness, her breath shallow, each inhale a decision. Dried blood marked her nose and lips. Every few minutes, her fingers twitched like they were tracing maps only she could see. Jax didn't look away from the scanner. He'd already made the calculation he didn't want to admit. They couldn't outrun a galaxy that wanted her. They had to disappear inside it instead. The sensor's blind static wavered. Then spiked. Not possible, he muttered. Something moved through the field, clean, precise, without touching any of it. No dust wake. No heat signature. No conventional drive trail. A hunter that didn't hunt like the others. Aria stirred. Jax killed the remaining power and let the fighter go dead in space. The cockpit fell into full darkness, broken only by the faint glow of the asteroid shadows sliding across the glass. The unknown craft slid past them at a distance too close for comfort. Jax watched it vanish. Aria whispered, "They hired outside the monopoly. That good or bad? It means he is afraid." Jax didn't like the sound of that. They waited 7 long minutes before he reignited minimal life support. The fighter breathed again. Aria didn't sit up this time. She stared at the ceiling. "I can't jump again like that," she said quietly. Jax nodded. "Then we don't." Her eyes shifted to him. "You will have to decide who we trust." "Been bad at that my whole life," he said. They drifted for hours before picking up a lawful signal, a trade spine node at the edge of controlled space. Not rich. Not safe. Just busy enough to hide in. The station called itself Crosscurrent. It was a stitched-together city built from things that had survived other names. Cargo rings. Habitat drums. Latticed markets that hung in zero-G like a spiderweb of profit and desperation. You could buy identities here. You could lose yourself just as fast. Jax slid into inbound traffic and let the fighter look like one more tired piece of metal looking for a wall to lean on. The dockmaster didn't look up when they landed. 30 cycles, the woman said. Pay up front. No questions unless they're expensive. Jax paid. They moved quickly through the crowd. Aria pulled a hood over her ears and kept her head down. Jax stayed half a step ahead, eyes always in motion. Merchants hawked data shards and vacuum-grown fruit. Street medics stitched wounds on open benches. Kids ran courier routes through adults who pretended not to watch them. Crosscurrent didn't care who you were. It only cared what you owed. They reached a rented pressure cube on the inner ring. One room. One door. One narrow viewport that stared into traffic until it blurred into light. Jax locked every seal and sagged against the wall. Aria sat slowly on the edge of the bunk. You said earlier I was a monopoly, she said. Still are. And now? And now you're a moving one. Silence threaded between them. A knock came at the door. Jax's hand closed around his weapon before the second knock finished. Package delivery, a voice called. We didn't order anything, Jax said. A pause. Then a soft laugh. You ordered existence. This is how it arrives. The door blew inward. The room filled with flash and smoke and bodies moving too fast for yelling. Jax fired blind through the haze. Something crashed into him from the side and drove him into the wall. His head rang. His vision doubled. Aria screamed his name. The smoke thinned. 3 figures stood inside the room. One lay dead at Jax's feet. 2 remained. Both wore civilian cloth over armored frames. Both carried weapons that folded space instead of piercing it. The woman in front did the talking. You're walking with something that breaks markets, she said. That draws predators that don't care which floor they tear through. Jax steadied himself. You here to sell help or collect a head? The woman smiled faintly. Both, if I'm careful. Her eyes drifted to Aria. You look smaller without your chains, she said. Aria stood despite the tremor in her legs. You were paid to bring me back. Yes, the woman admitted. By 3 competing buyers. Jax's mouth went dry. That sounds inefficient, he said. It is until only one remains. Behind her, the second intruder shifted position. Aria flinched. Jax fired. The bullet didn't land where physics expected it to. The spacefold weapon caught it mid-flight and dumped it sideways into the wall. Plaster and wire sprayed. The woman sighed. I hoped you'd be reasonable. Aria's hand pressed to her chest. The room warped. Just enough. Jax felt the floor slide under his boots as gravity slanted. The 2 intruders staggered. The second lost footing completely and slammed into the ceiling instead of the floor with a bone-shattering crack. The woman skidded back against the wall. Her eyes widened. You're burning yourself already, she said. Aria swayed. Jax caught her. Not worth the price, he said. The woman steadied herself and raised her weapon again. Another shot cracked through the doorway. The woman jerked and fell. A man stood in the ruined entrance with a rifle still smoking. Older. Scarred. Station authority badge scratched nearly smooth. You bring hunters into my lanes, the man said. You clean them up yourself. His gaze locked onto Jax. Well, he went on, look what the void dragged in. Jax frowned. Do I know you? The man snorted. No. But I know your trails. Name's Corin. He glanced at Aria, unconscious in Jax's arms. And that, he added quietly, is a problem I don't want alive inside my walls. Jax tightened his grip. You're too late to be neutral. Corin considered that. True, he said. So I'll be expensive instead. They moved her to a shielded medical vault below the market ring. Machines that normally rebuilt smugglers and accidents hummed around her, struggling to correct damage they didn't understand. Jax waited. Corin watched him do it. You draw heat like a flare, Corin remarked. And your flare just started a bidding war. Jax didn't answer. 3 syndicates already transmitted kill permits, Corin continued. And 1 signal came from a dead frequency band no one uses anymore. Jax's jaw tightened. Vargos. Corin nodded. He wants you alive. He wants her breathing. Jax laughed without humor. Lucky us. Hours passed. Aria woke grimacing. Her first word was Jax's name. He leaned in. Still here. She swallowed. It's getting worse. What is? The distance between using it and needing it again. He felt something cold settle behind his ribs. How long? Until I can't promise to stop. Corin leaned in from the doorway. Good news, the old enforcer said. Your hunters just killed each other outside my perimeter. Bad news. The one who paid them didn't. Jax closed his eyes. Corin crossed his arms. You want off this station alive, you make me rich or invisible. Preferably both. Jax stood. Aria reached for his sleeve. Don't, she whispered. He covered her hand. You don't get bought again. When he turned back to Corin, the decision was already written in his posture. What do you want? Jax asked. Corin smiled slowly. A ship that can hide something the galaxy refuses to lose, he said. And a pilot reckless enough to fly it. Far above the station, beyond the lawful lanes, something vast shifted its course. The net was closing wider now. And the price of freedom had officially entered bidding. The ship Corin gave them didn't look like much. It was called the Larkspur, though nothing about it suggested song. The hull was dull, layered in sensor-dampening skins that drank light instead of reflecting it. The engine core wasn't fast, but it was quiet in ways that made hunters uneasy. It flew like a secret. Jax liked it instantly. They lifted from crosscurrent under the cover of a routine debris purge, the station's traffic scattering in a noisy bloom that masked their wake. Corin watched from the dock railing, coat flapping in recycled wind. Once you're gone, he said over the comm, you're on your own. Jax smiled faintly. We already were. The Larkspur slid into the dark between lanes. Aria lay strapped into a padded recline behind the cockpit, thin cables threaded into monitoring nodes along her spine and temples. The med systems tracked numbers Jax didn't like watching fall. Every small fluctuation pulled at him more than any pursuit ever had. How far until they stop looking? She asked. They won't, Jax replied. But they'll spread out. That buys us choices. She followed the hum of the engine with her eyes. Every choice burns me. Jax didn't answer immediately. He set their course toward a region most charts marked as drift noise, unstable mass currents, shattered gravity planes, navigational dead ends. You said your gift opens paths, he said at last. Not that it has to. Aria turned her head slowly. You're thinking about sealing it. I'm thinking about ending the auction. The galaxy didn't like endings. They crossed into the broken region on inertial drift alone. The stars bent oddly here, stretched by tidal forces that never agreed on which way down was. The scanner screamed false positives and then went eerily quiet. And then the first net snapped. A blind surge slammed into the Larkspur's flank, ripping off a curtain of sensor mesh. Alerts flared across the cockpit. They found us faster than I hoped, Jax muttered. 3 hunter ships slid into view, shapes thin and sharp as knives carved from dark glass. They didn't broadcast. They didn't negotiate. They fired. Jax dove for the currents, cutting power to one engine and riding the unstable mass flow like a breaking wave. The Larkspur bucked violently. Aria cried out as force crushed her into the gel padding. Another net surged past them and detonated against a drifting rock the size of a transport, shearing it apart into a blooming storm of debris. Jax twisted through the fragments tearing at the hull like breaking surf. Jax, Aria whispered through the pain, they'll keep tightening. They always do. I know. He pulled up a hidden channel and opened a narrowband transmission into the chaotic frequencies of the broken region. Captain Vargos, Jax said evenly. You always did like watching your prey run. Silence followed. Then Vargos's voice slid through the static like a blade through cloth. You've degraded my property. She's not property. A soft chuckle. Everything becomes property when it bends. Jax glanced back at Aria. Blood had returned to her nose. Her hands trembled. You used her like a gate, Jax continued. Sold the future one shortcut at a time. You built an empire on years you stole from a single life. Efficiency is never theft, Vargos replied. It's selection. Jax's jaw tightened. Then select this. He cut the transmission. The hunters surged closer. Aria struggled upright against her restraints. If I open one last corridor, she said, voice shaking, I can scatter them. Permanently. And you? She didn't answer. Jax reached back and unclipped her harness himself. No, she said. Not like that, he replied. If this ends, it ends with you standing. He brought up the project he'd been rewriting since Crosscurrent. A crude model. Half theory. Half stubborn refusal to accept the shape of things. What you are, he said quietly, isn't just a key. You're a process. A living equation. Every jump takes a piece because you've been forcing open what should stay closed. Aria stared at the data. You want to redirect it, she breathed. Not outward, he said. Inward. Her eyes widened. You want me to close what I am. I want you to choose what you keep. Outside the cockpit, the first hunter locked onto their real mass signature. Jax took the larkspur straight at it. Alarms howled. He waited until the last second. Then he cut all thrust and let the ship drop dead into the broken gravity plane beneath them. The hunter overshot, momentum carrying it sideways into a shredding current that tore the craft apart like wet paper. 2 remained. Aria placed her hand against the nav core. But this time she didn't reach outward. She turned the map on herself. The air in the cockpit shifted. Not violently. Just enough to feel wrong. The stars dimmed. The pull in Jax's chest tightened like someone drawing a thread through him. Aria screamed. Jax grabbed her as light folded inward instead of out, collapsing toward the quiet center of her own existence. The corridor she had once been became a door that closed. The hunter that had locked onto them fired. The beam struck the space where the larkspur should have been. They weren't there. They were nowhere. For a long moment, there was no outside. No inside. Only pressure and release braided together. Then the universe let them go. They emerged in empty dark so deep the stars looked like rumors. The larkspur hung in stillness, systems flickering as they found themselves again. Aria collapsed. Jax pulled her against him, heart hammering. You did it, he whispered. Her eyes opened slowly. They were dimmer now. Softer. The sense of something vast moving behind them was gone. I closed it, she said. The corridors are gone. Jax swallowed. What did it cost? She took a shaky breath. Everything he wanted from me. Behind them, in the broken region, the remaining hunter surged blindly through warped space. And disappeared. Hours later, long after pursuit signals had bled into meaningless noise, Jax set the larkspur on a slow course toward lawful stars. Aria slept without twitching for the first time since he'd known her. When she woke, it was to the soft chime of a civilian port beacon. A small world waited ahead, blue-green and unremarkable. Unimportant enough to survive. They landed as no one. Jax sold the remaining parts of the larkspur that could be spared. Aria traded a fragment of old knowledge for a healing that didn't cost years of her life. Names were set aside. Past lives folded. Days passed. Then weeks. One night, under an unfamiliar sky, Aria stood beside Jax at the edge of a quiet field and felt the wind for the simple miracle it was. He'll look for me, she said. Of course he will, Jax replied. But he won't find what you used to be. She studied her hands. And you? He smiled faintly. I lost a child to a silence I never fought back against. I'm not losing you to another. The message of Vargos's fall traveled slowly, as all old tyrants' ends do. A fleet officer refused an order. A syndicate broke contract. The monopoly collapsed inward under the weight of its own hoarded future. Some said Vargos disappeared. Some said he suffocated in the space between the paths he could no longer force open. Jax never went looking. Months later, Aria learned to walk through crowds without being noticed. To choose a meal without calculating how much of her life it might cost. To touch water without thinking about gravity. One evening, as the sun dipped low, she turned to Jax. "You ruined an empire for me," she said. He shrugged. "Seemed like a fair trade for one life." She smiled. "Not almost. All the way." The galaxy went on as it always had. Power found new shapes. Greed learned new disguises. But somewhere beyond the reach of forced corridors and purchased futures, two people lived without being owned. And the moral that never made the star charts held true. Freedom is not something you take from the void. It is something you refuse to sell, no matter how wide the net becomes.